What's going on, creators? Yeah, just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to talk a little bit about the idea of, can you wake up an NPC person in your life? And by NPC, that's a broad brush for someone who's very unconscious, that's just believing narrative after narrative, despite contrary evidence to counter their point of view. Trying to just show with your own life experience why something may be needing a little bit more investigation. All of these kinds of characteristics, it almost is like dealing with somebody under a delusion or a spell. I've heard it be called like mass formation psychosis, on some level. Not to say people are psychotic and crazy, but, when you're under the spell of fear and hysteria 24/7, your judgments and your, the way you're just interacting with people in the world is very distorted. And so when dealing with somebody who's displaying a lot of those kind of attributes, another big red flag is when you bring up a opposing point of view, then a violent kind of like reaction happens where they're either just get super triggered, they start lashing out on you. I mean, it could be your friends, your family, people close to you. And it's like, what the fuck is going on with them? Why can't I talk to them anymore without them just freaking out over words? What's wrong with these people? And that's kind of what I want to talk about, where it's just like a lot of people over the past couple of years, I've experienced it since about 2016, before COVID, but that shit was still going on, where people were under this type of delusion, this kind of spell, where it's just like not questioning things, just living in a kind of sleeping kind of state of mind, where it's just like, how can you continue to support that? What is your logic? And when you question these types of things, a lot of times the immediate reaction from the people is just being triggered and shutting down, so it's like you could bring up like different just observations and things going on in your life that just are like, for example, like COVID, just saying, hey, why are you so afraid of something that's like 99.9% survivable? Brr, then next thing it's like, how dare you talk to me about this? There's people are dying, Mike. People are fucking dying. It's like, people are always dying. What are you talking about? It's like, is that new information for you? Have you never been to a funeral before? Or like, what are you hysterical about? And that continues, throughout these different narratives, where it's just like, Mike, don't you know that the inflation in the economy is just in free fall collapse? Aren't you aware of that? Why aren't you freaking out and hysterical? You should be buying Bitcoin and silver. What is your problem? It's like, what? What are you talking about? It's like that kind of constantly just reacting to narratives and being puppeted like a useful idiot, just through whatever narrative. Oh, don't you know that Ukraine is like super filled with superhumans that just need fucking support, and they haven't done anything beside, there's innocent victims, and how dare the bad man come and try to. It's like, you're talking to somebody who's like, lived through like the 9/11 fucking drama, had friends that went to war because of the lies of 9/11, and watched that for 20 years of just this fucking nonstop escalation, this fucking build up to troops in the Middle East and shit. And it's like, this is not the first time I've seen this shit. It's like, it's the same magic tricks over and over again. Only, people keep falling for it for some reason. It's like, how many times can you be lied to and keep thinking and like doubling down, like, oh, this time they're telling the truth. Oh, this organization that overthrows governments through deception and lying and manipulation, they do that over there. But they wouldn't possibly do that to us. It's like, why would you think that? Especially when you look at the history, where it's like all of these things of the quote unquote past, where it's like all these atrocities and shit. It's like, do you think they just stopped doing that? Because what? Why would you think that? But it's like those holes in just like logic, I guess, where it's just like, okay, well, if someone was doing this in the past, they're doing the same playbook right here, right now. It's like, why would you trust them then? well, Mike, you're just not an expert. You just don't know. You're just a fucking retard. It's like, they tell me that, it's like, for example, why would you let, like, people that are advocating depopulation, why would you inject something that they're offering into your body? I mean, seriously, think about that, but you can have these conversations with, like, the people that are under that spell, that NPC vibe. I don't believe anybody's like a, there's some extremes when it comes to, like, defining what an NPC is. Some people will just go as far as, like, they're actually just part of the simulation, they're part of the hologram, and they're separate from you, which I believe is an error, because we're all connected. So if someone is, like, deeply unconscious, I think it's an error to have in your own mind this judgment that you're, like, more, like, superior or better, because we're all kind of reflecting different aspects. And a lot of times the people that are NPC kind of, like, characteristics, where they're demonstrating a lot of that kind of state of consciousness, a lot of times they'll reflect your shadow, and so that's why I think a lot of people get really disturbed by, like, that behavior, and those attributes that they'll see in friends and family, where it's just like almost like a light switch went off, where it's like all of a sudden you're noticing they're acting very Truman Show-esque. It's like, what did you just say? It's like, are you promoting an advertisement as I'm talking? It's like, it's that kind of weird behavior that kind of throws you off when you first start becoming more and more aware of kind of reality, on some level. Kind of, you are kind of stepping out of the matrix, where maybe a year or 2 years ago you were the one that was, like, deeply asleep too, and so you didn't notice these things. So it's like part of, like, waking up out of the dream of the matrix world. You start seeing these anomalies and these weird things with people around you, the way people are just parroting things, it's like talking points from, like, television, and just political talking points that just get parroted over and over again, and that can be really disturbing when you first start to encounter that, especially when it's people that you love and care about, your friends, family, and stuff like that, people close to you. Then it's like, oh shit, I want to shake these people out of that spell. Well, you can do that, and I spent many years trying to do that, just not having very much success in doing that, actually creating a lot of conflict and damaging relationships by trying to shake people awake, trying to impose my will and my beliefs onto people. Even if there's, like, a lot of logic behind why these beliefs are something that's, like, worth bringing into another person, especially when you see people, like, with COVID shit, doubling down and injecting themselves with more and more shit. And it's like, hey, before you do that, why don't we just, like, why don't you hear my point of view of why I feel very strongly not to do that, and let's talk this out, because it feels like, to me, I'm watching you do something that might be self-destructive, that you might regret, and then come back to the fucking table of, like, I wish someone would have told me 3 years ago before now I got all these fucking dramas and issues, and so that's kind of where, like, the disconnect starts to be, where it's like, I'm trying to help, trying to I have a fear, but even with that, it's like you have to worry about what's going on within yourself. Are you reacting this way, treating this person who you're judging as, like, an NPC, or a sleep person, an unconscious person, or whatever? And it's like, well, I have fear and hysteria now, and I need you to be a certain way so I feel better. Well, that's a big red flag too, where it's just like, oh wait, maybe the problem's me. Oh shit. I kind of advocate a little bit more of, like, taking personal responsibility for your own state of mind. Looking at people that you are judging as being on the other side of the fence, maybe is the easiest way to say it. Like, if you're a Republican, just if you're into politics, it's easy to see that as an example, where it's like, well, I'm on the right, and then that person's on the left, and so everything the person on the left is doing, like, to me, it seems like NPC behavior, unconscious behavior, self-destructive, on some level, in that kind of, then that kind of whatever, it's just like they're displaying a lot of those characteristics in my eyes. First thing to start to do is for one, let go of like needing to do anything for the other person. As hard as that might be to hear, if you have people that are displaying a lot of unconscious behavior, maybe they're aggressive, violent, just get very like irrationally triggered when you're just bringing up just words, and you just say just like a simple thing a 3-year-old could comprehend and digest, and they're off the rails when you bring that up. Keep in mind, it's like some people don't want to be woken up at this moment. They don't want to hear it, and spiritually, I don't think that's your business to try to shake people awake. It's like I feel like that's part of God's plan, and when God's ready to wake that person up, they'll be woke up. It's like they have to make the choice for themselves to want to pursue truth and actually know and actually grow and everything and evolve like that. Some people at this moment don't want that, and so putting your own fear-based, oh, I need them to do this because I'm afraid for them. Again, that's your problem, and that's you not trusting God and God's design. And so let that stuff go. Start to look more at like what are these people reflecting back to me? A lot of times if you're starting a business or you're like have a desire that you're looking to take to the next level, a lot of times the people that in your space represent your shadow, the NPC, the unconsciousness, whatever label. The label's not important. It's more of the attribute of like that spirit, I guess, is maybe one way to say it. And they're demonstrating, where you're trying to demonstrate more love. They're showing you fear. And you can use that contrast on some level if you're not super triggered by that, especially if it's somebody like, oh, my mother's doing this, or my father's doing this, or my grandparents are doing this, or, my uncle and my friends, my best friend is now we're having conflict all of a sudden. It doesn't make any sense. Start to kind of go within yourself, ask God what to do is the most important thing, and start to work on that spiritual relationship, because part of like waking up to creation is realizing that you were in a state of sleep. You were unconscious at some point too, and like looking towards Jesus, and when he was murdered, he forgave the people that murdered him, because as in the words of Jesus, they know not what they do. They're unconsciously doing this. They're not doing this consciously. And so looking at, and there's many biblical examples of this kind of phenomenon, the Antichrist spirit, for example, but, also, Jesus is, saying, let the dead bury the dead. I feel like that's like a kind of what am I trying to say? It's kind of a example of like that unconsciousness, but there's many examples of that kind of state of mind. It's just the Old Testament referring to the Jews as being slaves in Egypt, for example. I feel like a lot of people before they become conscious are in a slave state. I feel like the NPC state is a slave, and part of like getting out of that beast system, Egypt, is in starting to follow what God says to do, to spiritually start to connect with that truth, and let God get you out of Egypt through your own walk through consciousness. But like looking at the NPCs and people that are just like kind of just under a delusion, that are just rejecting creation and rejecting truth and believing lies. A lot of times you can start to look at them with a more compassionate lens when you realize that even in their state, they will start to mirror a lot of fear, their hysteria, government hysteria, whatever, and that's what they'll start mirroring back to you. It's one thing, if you're like new to that. But once you start seeing that that's just something that happens, that they're not really doing it intentionally, they're not doing it consciously, they're just unconsciously, because a lot of people in the old state of being will never really be present. They'll either be in their mind thinking about the past, or they'll be thinking about the future in the present moment, and they're planning and doing all this shit for this future that's not real. But when you're talking with them, it's almost like they're not there. It's like, can we focus on, just enjoying the day? Can we can we just try right now to not argue? Can we just try to talk to each other, try to understand where we're coming from? Some people can't even do that. It's like they're so threatened and so in a state of fear about anything that contradicts their flimsy worldview that they just can't bear it for some reason. And that's just, and that's their struggle. That's their deal. What you can do is start to imagine them in a different state of consciousness, for example, because we are still all connected. And so you can, kind of follow the advice of Jesus and do unto others as you'd like it be done to you. So if you were in a state where you drift, and we all drift in and out of conscious states, through, whatever could be the trigger, and it could all of a sudden, I could be super, present, super conscious, really demonstrating a lot of love, and maybe something happens in my world, in my little space, and now all of a sudden I'm fucking freaking out, and I'm triggered, and everything's pissing me off, and people are just being annoying and difficult, and then I'm being annoying and difficult to people too, just because I feel like stirring the pot a little bit. We all do these things from time to time, but, people are at different levels of that. And so to paint this broad brush of, these are NPCs, these are just not part of creation, like God didn't create that person, like that's just some filler person. I don't feel like that's a healthy way to look at things. I feel like that's a dehumanizing way to look at people and can lead to atrocities. If you think of people in less than terms like vermin or something like that, they're just NPCs, there's vermin, and I feel like a lot of like the people on the unconscious side of the creation, when it comes like depopulating stuff, I feel like they're destroying the NPC minded, and I feel like it's all self-destructing. It's like the people that are NPCs on top of that pyramid or the bottom of it are all doubling down on destroying themselves for some reason. And not to say that to put out fear and hysteria, but to put out just maybe a little bit more of an understanding, to have compassion. But I think I'm going to bounce. I got to get this house power washed. But I just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention. It's something to think about, something for your mental diet for today. Stop maybe looking at people like that are NPCs as like less than or whatever, but just to look at it more as like, okay, in this particular moment, say, you're starting to do a business or whatever, a lot of times they'll start demonstrating your fears, hysteria, why they don't do it. And that will be what they offer to you. Just look at that as like that person doesn't realize what they're doing, and they're kind of just mirroring back aspects of my own shadow, the things that I secretly on some level am afraid of, or whatever. But don't take it. You don't have to take the offer and like make that part of your identity either. We're called to love. And love our enemies on some level, and not to say that the people that are under the spell, the delusion of fear and hysteria and separation are your enemy. You should be walking in victory and not looking at having a foe, an enemy. You can just look at them as this is what it is. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree with what they're offering. You can start to imagine for them a higher state of consciousness, that their fears be relieved, that they be woken up in God's timing, and that God protects them from themselves. And in doing that, you'll instantly start feeling your own energy start to amplify. So it's a benefit also to you to do that. And with that being said, I think I'm balanced. So thanks to everybody for liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. I appreciate your spiritual support and your financial support. Thank you for that. Until the next now, God bless.